you touched upon something very interesting in last Rebuilding Buff, and it was on my mind, and I did not realize it was this person. The image I always had was Curt Henning. Curt Henning, the Mr. Perfect vignettes and how he was like the multi-sport athlete. And apparently he was really good at all those items. He played football,
Oh,
baseball, horseshoes, whatever. Curt Henning was the man, apparently. And you brought up the name Paul Roma, that apparently Paul Roma in his day was also. But, buddy, you're not far behind there.
no, I'm not. But still, I told you last time, I'd never been beat at any sports, anything athletic wise. I've never been beaten as bad as Paul Roma beat me at racquetball that day. I mean, I really had thought that I was a super athlete at everything, and I feel like I still am. But he taught me that there's another level. And Paul Roma is a super, super athlete. He really is. I mean, bro, look back at some matches. He would run to the turnbuckle. Now, keep in mind, those pads wasn't like a step. They wasn't like a step. Those pads were boom, boom, boom. So to climb those pads, the turnbuckles, it wasn't like climbing a step. You're climbing straight up. And I can tell you one of Clash of Champions that we beat them for the titles was when they were pretty wonderful. And me and Stars and Stripes. One of the spots where I shot him off and he climbed the road, he climbed the pads and then jumped behind me. And then, when you go to the ropes and you grab them and you do that up and over thing and you run underneath, he messes that up. And you can see me kind of cover it for him. And then I feed out, duck his clothesline and clothesline him back and then drop kick and hip toss and all that stuff. But he was just a super, super, super athlete. But so was Curt Henning, man. Those guys, all those Minnesota boys were just really, really, really superstar athletes.
So if we're going to give you your credit due, and I meant the intro when we did the first chapter, as far as talking about the real Marc Bagwell and the idea behind it, people I don't think give enough credit to go back to the archives and understand your progression through wrestling. Many know the Buff, know that Jack guy who's, able to lift people over his head. But Marcus Alexander also was very quick, agile. Like, you really gave yourself to the craft. You were a wrestler's wrestler. And
yes,
that was very obvious. And you put the time into the training, and you could do the moves like anyone, especially for a built guy. And you took it very, very seriously. And I want to give you, first of all, the credit for doing that. And I would guess that a lot of that athleticism came from the fact that you were a multi-sport athlete growing up.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. But, it's really weird. Professional wrestling, like, for example, if I was to throw, and I worship the ground Ric Flair walks on. But if I was to throw
Rick, by the way.
If I was to throw him a football and say, hey, throw that football to me, do you think there's going to be a spiral football come back at me? Why, hell no, there's not. And if I threw him a baseball at the pitcher's mound and said, throw me a strike, do you think Ric Flair is going to get a baseball, wind up, and throw me a strike? Why, hell no, he's not. But he's one of the best wrestlers in the history of time. So it goes to show you that wrestling really isn't about being an athlete. It's about having all of it, but you got to have it all. And that's where it gets a little bit confusing on, do you, is it people think, was it athletes? Is it being athletic? And it's really not. It's a combination of several things. I'm not just saying it because I'm in the business, but you've got to have charisma. You've got to have you got to have mic skills. You got to have athleticism. There's just a combination of different things you got to have to make it to be a pro wrestler, but it's a little bit of several things to make that happen. And if this one, that's not enough. That's not enough to make it. It takes several things to make a Rock, to make a Stone Cold, to make a Rick Rude, to make a Curt Henning, to make a Buff Bagwell, to make a Brian Pillman, to make a Eddie Guerrero. It ain't just football. It ain't just sports. It ain't just good looks. It ain't just weight training. It ain't just football. It ain't just it's just a combination of all of that, and then bringing it all together and finding that character and then putting it all together. But being an athlete, I think, does help tremendously. But I know several guys that turned out to be great wrestlers, you know.
Well, I kind of want to go back there into one of them. Now, it's funny. I was a big Macho Man, Randy Savage, or Randy Poffo fan back in the day. And,
Yeah.
you have to go back and look a little bit, and people may
Triple-
not believe it, but
Yeah,
the man was a
baseball.
baseball player, you know?
Yeah, AAA.
If he hadn't busted his knee, we would have never seen the Macho Man. He would have been Randy Poffo, Cincinnati Reds baseball player. And when you see a
Yes.
picture of him on a baseball card, it is the funniest thing because it's so remote from who he actually became.
Right.
And the one sport I want to talk about with you today, because I don't know if that's your defining moment, but I know it's one that stuck out deeply. We will talk about boxing one day. We'll talk about hunting and fishing, but football. I want to talk about Thor, or could have been Thor, the football star, because that was apparently your jam back in high school.
Yes.
So when did you take up, Mark, the sport of football, and how soon did you progress in it?
My very first football game ever. I rushed for 406 yards as a running back. 406 yards in, and what they call, populous, football, and it just.
How old are you at this point?
8 or 9, maybe 10.
Okay.
So, I remember I used to do weigh-ins, and I weighed with all of my pads on and holding my helmet because I was just really thin for my age. So, it didn't matter, but I was still a stallion. And I remember coming home after that 406-yard day, and I told my dad, I go, I said, I don't really like football. He said, well, son, if you don't like football after the day, you're never going to like it. You just rushed for 406 yards. And the article came out, and I'll find the article and show it to you.
Please.
Because my parents saved everything. I got all my photo albums all numbered and listed and everything. And it says, instead of the Blackwell Bears, because that's what we were called the Blackwell Bears. It said, instead of the Blackwell Bears, they should be called the Bagwell Bears. And because I rushed for 400 yards, my first game ever. And it was crazy, it was like nuts. So, but I took a year off and did the boxing thing, and I won the Golden Gloves in Georgia. I won the state championship in Georgia. And then the weight thing came to bother me again because they went from weight, they went from age to weight. And then with the weight, I was not big for my age.
Right.
So I started getting my brains beat out. And so I also took a year off and then come back to boxing. And because I was 61-1, I got beat one time in 61 fights. And it was just a fluke thing in the middle of me trying to be the Golden Glove state champion boxer. And a kid won. I got the picture of that even. And I'm looking over at the kid like this. and he's like jumping in the air like this high off the ground. And like I beat him. And it was a fluke deal. And he won, but it was just, but he did win. He got the victory. And so I was 61-1. And in the Marietta Daily Journal, that was what our newspaper was growing up, where I grew up. And it said that they called me the Killer Bee. And it was the name that they thought of, the Marietta Daily Journal. And that was the #1 paper in Marietta, Georgia. And so I was called the Killer Bee. And but yeah, so I won the state championship and Golden Gloves. And I was going to take a year off and come back, but then football, baseball, high school happened, girls, cars, all that stuff. So I never went back to it. I took a year off and never went back. But I did at least get in 1982, at 12 years old, I won the Golden Gloves state championship boxing.
It's amazing to think, at such a young age, what could have happened with boxing. And, people know you from the Roddy Piper fight and they thought it was gimmicky, but truth is you knew what you were doing in there. You've done it,
Yeah,
when you
absolutely.
integrated from such a young age, it never leaves you, I'm sure.
Of course not.
But for people,
and like even back then, keeping in mind charisma and things like that, keep in mind the apple don't fall far from the tree. My mom, I didn't have, all the rest of the kids, they boxed in tennis shoes. Well, I wasn't going to box in tennis shoes. There's no way. I was going to box in a pair of boxing boots. Well, they didn't make boxing boots for 12-year-old kids in 1982. So my mother came up with the idea of having a pair of skating, like skates, yes, the boots for skates, taking the wheels off and making a sole for the mat, like a pair of wrestling boots. And then you had a pair of boots. And we put the tassels on them and everything like they do in the pros. So I had a pair of boots when you fought me, and I didn't come out in a pair of tennis shoes to box. I had the Everlast robe, the Everlast, pants, just like I did with Roddy Piper. I came out with the Everlast pants and the robe, and I came out, looking like $1 million, like I came out ready to go, to be the best.
Did you ever think that if Judy had gone and patented that idea, you guys would have been billionaires?
I know.
Unbelievable. So she actually came up with boxing boots and never ran with it. Oh.
No. Yeah. And just came up, just her thinking of, because I used to go to skating rinks and stuff, and she thought, what if we did that out of skating boots, And keep in mind, the world would have done it. My God, the world would have gone crazy over it. But I keep in mind, we also had a multi-million-dollar lumber business that had been like,
what's another few million?
Yeah, what's another couple million? It was just, that's how you think at that stage. You really do,
But for people watching, Marc, all over the world, to understand when you're in high school in the United States, specifically Georgia, but you could have been in Texas, you could have been in California, you could have been in Florida. From the sexiness of sports that drives high school students, baseball, basketball, but football is just at another level. Even high school football, the kind of crowds that come out to these kind of games is more than any professional league in a lot of sports.
Oh yeah. I mean, when we played McEachern, there were 25,000 people there
for high school.
And I took the opening kickoff and went 80 yards for a touchdown. And this is at McEachern, and of course we got killed by them, but for just a moment there we were gods because of the 80-yard touchdown run I did. And it was really cool because they had a big 40-foot Indian. They were called the McEachern Indians, and they were the first stadium in high school to have the bleachers on both sides. Most schools had the bleachers during my run they had the bleachers on the on the home side, and they had the aluminum benches on the visitor side. But then high school football got so big, it became bleachers on both sides. But McEacher was the first to have that. And they were huge. And to me to catch that first opening kickoff and, you know, take it all the way back for a touchdown was huge, you know.
How many years did you play high school football and what positions?
I was actually a really good quarterback, but we had another really good quarterback, and I was a big kid. I was about 180 pounds, which back then that was a big kid, 180. So I was a 180-pound fullback that could run. I had about a 4.40, which ain't lightning fast, but it's fast. And you know, still and at high school level, but there was no reason to have two guys fighting for the quarterback position when I also was a really good running back. And let's just, you know, I was a backup quarterback if he got hurt, but at the same time, I played fullback. So mainly I was fullback all through my career.
Yeah. And how many years in high school did you end up playing football?
Four.
All
4. Yeah. I was all county, all state, all 4 years.
Were there the dreams for you of one day playing college ball, one day NFL at all?
Not really, because we just knew that we were going to be working for our parents. So my grades were horrible. I went to school about twice a week is all I went to school. Back then, you didn't have to go to school and get in trouble if you didn't go. And nowadays, if you don't go, parents get in trouble, you know?
Yes.
But that ain't how it is. That ain't how it was back then. I'd walk in late to school, reach in and get a piece of paper and a pen from the nurse that was waiting for me to check in late. And I'd sign, I'd go, Marcus is late because he didn't feel good this morning. Judy Bagwell. And she'd watch me do it, and I'd slide the paper back to her. But she knew if she called my mom, what's my mom going to say? She's going to say, he didn't feel good this morning. That's why he's late. And they knew that. So they just went like, well, what do we do? I mean, we know she's going to lie for him. So, you know, I promise you, if you went back and looked after 1988 in Cobb County schools, there was a bunch of rules that changed dramatically because I broke rules. Every rule there was to break and got away with it.
Well, from what you were saying,
I went to school just enough to play ball, which was twice a week.
Just so everybody gets the image of this, you know, school started, classes are going. The days he feels like showing up, all of a sudden you hear the red Corvette show up. He's like 15, 16, parks to where he's likes. He walks out. Everybody's standing by the windows. Class, all of a sudden it gets interrupted. This is the level, like it's for like the movies. Like, you know, you're living a real life dream here. Yes. You're not a professional wrestler at this point. You're in high school, but you already have that celebrity feeling.
Right, exactly. And that's what helped me, along with Missy, be ready for the professional wrestling. They thought this kid had never been nowhere, never done anything, but this kid had already been through everything that they thought I'd never been through. And so I was really ready for anything they brought at me. I just had to be a little bit shined up by Missy and told what was coming at me a little bit. But besides that, I'd already gone through the heat. We just called it jealousy in Marietta. So that's all it was. It was just I was kind of ready for it already. When you, like I said, when you come pulling up in a 1985 red Corvette at 15 years old, not even 16, and you got a parking place and you're there, and you got all the kids are in the windows waiting for me to show up, and they know I'm going to be late, and I'm playing Little Red Corvette on my Corvette, you know, by Prince. I mean, that's just, you can't get any more heat than that. There's no more heat That's the most heat you can get. And they wanted to act like they taught me what heat was in wrestling. And I was like, I said, are y'all kidding me? I said, I've had heat my whole life. I said, y'all think this is heat? Imagine pulling up in a red Corvette to high school and you're 30 minutes late every day to homeroom.
And
that's heat.
But Marcus growing up, so this kind of now is bringing it full circle. You didn't know you're going to grow up to be a wrestler. You didn't actually think you're going to be a football player. You thought you're going to be in the lumber business, a lumber empire.
In other words, here's the catch. This is what makes it so great. And I'm going to really bring it full circle for you.
Let's do it.
I was just being me. I was just being me. I woke up and I went and cranked my red Corvette and I went to school. If I was on time, I went to homeroom. If I wasn't, I went and signed in late and went to first period. And then I went to football and baseball practice and played ball, knowing my parents were rich and knowing I had something to do after high school, which is something very good to have. But then all that got jerked away from me in 1988 when I graduated and my parents went broke. So my brothers got the ride, but I didn't get the ride of their ride.
How many brothers do you have, Mark?
Two brothers.
Two brothers. So there's ever a thought in 88 at that point, you know what, boys, let's strap our boots together. Let's go the Bagwell Brothers Lumberyard. Was there a thought of any point of restarting a third generation of it?
When my parents, we were so strong in the lumber business that when we sold out, we had to sign a disclosure saying we could not open another lumber company within like 5 years, because they knew if we sold them the lumber company, all we had to do is go over here, open up another one, and people were still going to go to the Bagwells. So the people that bought it from us made us sign a disclosure. And so there was no way we could go back in and do that.
So for those people, sitting here and saying, and we talk a lot about this as far as what happened through career and, WCW, WWF, WWE, and what if could have happened this way. You've been living in what ifs your whole life, man. You've had one scenario and then the rug gets taken out from you and we got to start again. So this is nothing new for you. This has happened before and this has happened through life, man.
And the catch is I had to sit in that locker room and act like it was the first time this happened to me. I had to sit there going, hey guys, what's up? I'm just Marcus Bagwell trying to fit in. And little do they know, the biggest, wildest, craziest bastard in the room was the kid sitting in the corner. He already had lived his full life, and Sting was the first one to learn it. And he was like, man, you guys got no idea how cool Bagwell is. Bagwell's the coolest guy out of anybody in his locker room. And they were like, he look at him, he's a prima donna. And then all of a sudden, a couple guys get knocked out. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, maybe there's more to this guy, you just don't knock somebody out, not know what you're doing. And all of a sudden, your nasty boys started respecting me. And then once Sting approved of me, then everybody started approving of me. And I was fitted in, and everybody started liking Marcus Bagwell.
So, because people watching, and different stages of your career, if you came into the stage where you saw Marcus Alexander Bagwell at the beginning of WCW, as I did at the time, you would think vanilla, apple pie, church going, maybe you still are, but as straight line, what you see is what you get. And then you think, and I always thought to myself, how did he evolve to Buff? What became the Renaissance? But the truth was, Buff was always in there. He was really Buff from day one. We just didn't know it. You lived that. You didn't call yourself Buff, but you were Buff.
Listen to this.
Yeah.
We used to play a game when I was 14 years old that I don't know if even you, and don't take this wrong, please, but I'm not sure that you even had the upbringing to even think this way. This is how we thought, being the Bagwells and being as popular as we were and as powerful as we were and good looking and athletic and everything, but super cool, super humble. Everybody that met us loved us, but they hated the Bagwell persona until they met the Bagwell. So we used to play this game when you, at nighttime, when you would go buy a car. Do you ever remember driving a car when you were like 16, 17 years old? And like you would look at the next driver and you would, as you went by each other?
Of course. Still do.
Okay. Did you ever remember seeing kind of a rough look when that happened?
A couple times at least, yeah.
Okay. We had a game that if you saw a rough look and you looked in the rearview mirror, and if you saw brake lights, you turned around and went back and fought. And it was called brake lights.
Brake lights.
Except we went back, got out of the car and went boom, 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 boom with the gun. And everybody jumps in the ditches. And we go, does anybody got any problems? So that's the way we did brake lights. There wasn't no fighting. We just went back and shot our gun and said, you got a problem. And everybody's hiding in the ditches, waiting for the Bagwells to back out of their big 4-wheel drive vehicle. And that's the most expensive car on the road, and pull off and leave. And we're laughing at them like, be careful the next time you're talking to somebody. We try to play brake lights, but it was called brake lights. So we'd go back and turn around as somebody hit their brake lights. That was like somebody going, oh, well, somebody wants to fight. So we'd turn around and go back to fight. And it was just the way we were raised. It was just crazy. It was just off the chain. It was just a crazy life we led. Like I said, that nobody really realized of the young kid that came in, how he was already really ready for all of this, you know.
Mark, man, I grew up in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. We're like, hello, and I'm so sorry for being Canadian. I apologize.
Yeah.
You know, we're so polite
all
the time.
I hope my brake lights didn't hurt your eyes.
But we never played brake lights around here, and that will
Brake
explain
lights,
brake
brother.
lights. But that will also explain a lot, that the guy you saw on TV that you thought was Marcus Alexander Bagwell that eventually evolved into Buff Bagwell, guess what? In his childhood, he was playing brake lights, and
yes.
So that's pretty badass.
But the catch is, but through Missy, here's the catch now. Here's what you got to understand. Mm-hmm. Through Missy Hyatt's teaching, I knew I had to go like this with the brake lights, Marc Bagwell. I knew I had to go like this with the all-county, all-state football, baseball player. I knew I had to go like this with the Golden Gloves state championship boxing. I knew I had to go like this with being in jail more than anybody, all the entire locker room combined. I've been in jail more than all of them. I knew I had to do this with all of those things to get along with what Missy, once she fully explained how the wrestling business was and how they were going to treat me looking the way I looked. They were going to hate my guts. They were not going to accept me. They were going to ride my ass. They were going to, I was going to have heat. She taught me all this, and I was ready for all of it, to the point I already knew I had to back all of that down before I even was able to do it. Then all of a sudden, all of that stuff kind of starts getting brought back up, and people think it's cool, and I'm accepted at WCW because of it. The shooting my father and us being friends when I shot my dad with a gun. Right. And you shot him in the arm because he was beating my mom up, and these stories like brake lights and Golden Glove state champion and you know, all county, all state football, baseball, all of these things that I had to keep under wraps in car rides, they start coming out. And Sting's like, man, you guys got no idea how cool Bagwell is. Bagwell's cool. And then the rest of them all of a sudden saw Bagwell knock a couple of guys out. And then I was, being a prima donna pretty boy, I was accepted finally. I was accepted as Marc Bagwell. And there wasn't a top hat. There wasn't a gimmick. There wasn't a character. I was just being me. I was just being myself, and still had to pump the brakes to fit into the wrestling world. So when I unleashed all of that information, oh my God, can you imagine how much heat I had? It was like, wait a minute, you know, we like him for that, but at the same time, God, he's too much. He's just too much. And so it became kind of a bad thing for them to know about all of that, you know. But I had to be real quiet even to fit in. But then those stories made me cool to fit into the group. But then the WWF guys, they didn't know the whole story like WCW guys knew.
Right.
So they didn't know that part of me. So they didn't get a chance to meet me the right way. So they outcasted me from jump, you know, and you can't blame them. I mean, my God, if I read my resume, I'd hate my own self. But it's the truth. It just happened. It was just the way life happened.
And that's where the idea of this docuseries was born at the end of the day, with people asking me, you know, as far as friends and producer asked me, and then people commenting on the episodes of Chosen Life, they're like, what's Marc really like? I'm like, well, you know what? You're going to find out. Because I can tell you when I speak to him off air, but the truth of the matter is, folks, sorry to break it to you, he is Buff. At the end of the day, Buff isn't this imaginary character. It actually is his persona. It actually is Marc, just in different ways.
I mean, the night that Nick Patrick in First Class, when he said, what about Buff? I mean, everybody just stopped and just went, that's it. Buff Bagwell. Oh my God, that should have been my name the whole time. I mean, I've been Buff the whole time. So that's perfect. And so when that came out, then I just unleashed myself, and it got a lot of heat, but then it also got me over, you know, it got me very popular at the same time.
And I told you that was one of my best birthday presents ever, because you actually came out for the first time as Buff Bagwell on my birthday. And I was watching that episode and I said, this is the greatest thing ever. I love this. My eyes lit up the same way. I still hear the Buff Bagwell song, and when I'm working out, and I'm like, my eyes light up the same way.
Yes.
Every time I hear that song, I get so inspired. I can go pump more iron because it just gives you that.
Yes, absolutely, dude. And that's just always what we brought. We just brought, like I said, I've never met anybody in my life. This is the honest God true statement. Not that I know of. I've never met anybody that says, I met Marc Bagwell and I don't like him. Everybody that's ever met me has said, you know what, man? You really are a great guy, man. You know, you're a cool guy. And I wouldn't say that old saying for every time if I had a nickel for every time somebody said that, but if I had $1 for every time I heard that, I would be a millionaire, because I am a genuinely nice guy. I've got a huge heart. I mean well with everything I say and do. I give a shit about everybody. I stand in front of my gimmick table and I hug people, and it's genuine. If you just step back and just watch me, it's genuine on how I treat my fans and how I care because of the manners of my mom and father, the way they raised me. And it just meant so much to people on the way I did it. And so, of course, that caused a lot of heat with fans. I mean, with the boys. But even they were overtaken by it and loved Buff Bagwell until Vince bought us. Then the guys didn't know me. So then it was, wait a minute, who's this, Corvette riding, cocky, all state, who's this guy, Then there was the heat again, instead of friends that knew the real story.
And I also want to sum up, Marc, today in this chapter. And first of all, when you give your time, it is the most precious commodity you got. And for people to understand, when you came on The Chosen Life for each episode, us filming this docuseries, this is Marc taking time out of his such busy schedule to be able to do this. And he's not doing it for him. He's not doing it for me. He's doing it for you. He's doing it for those fans.
Absolutely.
And, I usually say I do things for the lovers, for the fans and everything else. But a lot of this is born, truthfully, out of the haters. And for all of you that are those, couch quarterbacks that you read a headline and you watch a clip and you think you're so smart by putting on those, damn comments and other people then responding back to it, and you're all chiming in, you all think you're so good about it. I'm calling your bluff. I'm showing you, and we're going to show you every chapter. It's a real human being you're talking about, just like you. Makes mistakes, does things right, but works his ass off and has good intentions. And you want to know the real person behind the hat, this is what you're seeing. And you know what? Marc, if there's something I've seen a lot, haters are very, very, very powerful behind their keyboards, but face to face, when they're actually going to talk to you, they turn around right away. So it's turning those haters into lovers. And you know what? You may love him, you may not love him, but you know what? Respect him, because he's still the greatest thing going today, man. So
that's it, man. I appreciate it, bro.
Marc, thanks for taking time today. And for next chapter, when we come in on this, we've talked about it. We're going to do something you've never seen on Marc Bagwell before. We're going to be having family joining us. Cousin Jerry's going to be joining us.
I can't wait. Jerry Hood. Oh my God. That's going to be, he is so funny. We're going to have such a good time with him. He's got a great, he knows he's the closest thing to being a brother, but he's a cousin. He's my first cousin, but he's the closest thing to, like, with his hat on backwards, he looks with a goatee, he looks like us. He looks like a Bagwell. All of us love him. Jerry's a great guy, and that's gonna be a really great episode. He's got great stories. He's got so many more stories to add to, like the part of, you just can't make this up. I mean, you can't make these stories up. They're just so real, and they're just so true. But he's going to add to them and tell so many great stories that it's just great.
I'm blown away. Like, he did a filter once and he showed me, like, you guys could pass as brothers. And when he talks and I close my eyes, I can hear you almost. Like,
oh yeah. And he does a great imitation of my mom. Oh my God. I'll make him do it when we do it.
Well, your moms are almost twins. Your moms are almost twins. He showed me a picture of you with his mom.
Oh my God. Hey, my mom and her sister, his mother. I mean, they're like twins. Martha Sue's her name. And my mom was Judy Ann.
There we go. So this is the real Marc Bagwell. This is the wrestling docuseries that the fans have been clamoring for. We'll see you back on the next chapter. Marc, as always, thank you for taking time, my brother.
Thank you, man. See you soon.
Lots of love.
You too.